Dim the lights. Let the room set its oars down and hush. Unclench your hands. Let your shoulders sink like anchors settling into soft sand. You are safe, and your pillow has the temper of a loyal harbor. Steady, a little salt-worn, never in a hurry. In a moment you will wake somewhere else. You do not need a ticket or papers or even a good reason. Only breath, and you have that. Good. Close the door behind the day. Leave the latch on gentleness. Ready? Good. You blink, and you wake in a medieval English port. The hour when night loosens its grip and morning negotiates terms with the bells. Good news. No one expects you to own a ship or solve the weather. Bad news. The sea has already found your lips and intends to stay there. The air wears salt like a shawl. You taste it first, metal soft, like a coin that has learned manners, like rain with a memory. The ropes talk in their wooden throats, a low creak like stairs deciding to be brave. Tar breathes from the seams of planks. Damp oak leans in with a sweetness borrowed from old forests. Fish, yesterdays, todays, and the fish that will never admit to being tomorrows. Add their honest argument to the air. Your fingertips learn the harbor by touch. The bristle of hemp against skin. The slick of worn rail, the cool bead of night sweat on iron rings. A gull drops a complaint onto the morning and laughs at its own sense of timing. Your breath fogs once, then disappears, as if the air had swallowed a polite secret. It is colder than it looks, but the day is kindly and will let your bones catch up. Your cot is a narrow promise in a room with slanted opinions. The blanket smells faintly of lanolin, ash, and thyme. A sheep and a hearth and a grandfather you haven't met agreeing to share a sentence. The ceiling beam leans across the room like a friend who has stayed too long at table. Through a bubbled window you see the estuary thinking in pewter and pearl. Masts scribble ink-thin lines against cloud. A hedge of needles holding up the sky. The floorboards listen as you stand. The house is an inland ship. It creaks like a hull, believes in ballast, favors hat hooks and simple prayers. You dress the way the town dresses, in layers and stubbornness. A tunic that remembers soap badly. A belt that squeaks like a mouse with a secret. Shoes that know the street better than you do and forgive you for it. The door opens inward, then outward, as though undecided, and the morning walks in first. The first bell offers its iron syllable to the roofs. It glides along gutters, touches the river, wakes a pair of dogs who have been negotiating the fate of a fishtail since yesterday afternoon. You step into a lane that pretends to be straight and fails charmingly. Upper stories lean out over the street to gossip with each other. Timber elbows touching across the way. Carvings crowd the lintels. Hearts cut by bored apprentices. Crude ships straining for better seas. A saint's initials defending a door that needs more defense than initials can give. A shutter rises with the tired elegance of a curtain in a well-used play. A woman sweeps the step toward the world as though making an invitation. A boy carries a pail like a crown, walking carefully so his kingdom won't spill. An old man contributes tacks to the drain and inspects the horizon with the suspicion of someone who has lived long enough to be right more often than wrong. The street smells of damp stone and yeast and something iron-blooded you can't name. It will tell you later. You walk toward the water because in a port every road is a pilgrim and the harbor is its shrine. The ground tilts gently until it confesses. Then the tide appears, neither arriving nor leaving, only rehearsing both. It runs a wet hand over the mud banks so they shine like groomed animals. Broken shells write white grammar in the brown. A skiff, late for its own business, knocks the quay with the resigned rhythm of contrition. The sky keeps a straight face but cannot help a pale grin at the edge. A ribbon of weak sunlight buttons itself into the cloud. A wind from the channel flosses the warehouses and mutters about France. It changes its mind, brings you a small bouquet of weather. A lick of drizzle, a draft with old rumors in it, and a pause like a held breath. Gulls assemble a committee and audit the morning's food with firm wings and louder opinions. Their shadows cross your boots like moving signatures. You lean on a bollard that has tested more knots than a monk has sins. It carries the warmth of yesterday's hands and the cool of last night's fog. A cooper hums past with a cask, guiding it with 2 fingers. The barrel glows with new pitch and the relief of agreeing staves. At the slip, 2 men debate tide tables with the anxiety of saints defining angels. Each certain, both damp. They consult the moon, a washed coin in a bucket of daylight, and shrug toward the harbor mouth where the sea has perfected the art of not answering. You notice water's small economies. A bucket under a drip writes a private ledger. A girl rinses knives with the same hand that disciplines a cat. A sailor, gilt with dried spray, studies the map of his knuckles as though it led somewhere he has not yet been. And it is only the first hour. The market unpacks itself in a sequence of practiced gestures. Stalls unfold like birds opening wings. Boards are sluiced with brine. The sound is a slap and a blessing. Crates appear like square seas, full of flounder the color of tired mirrors, whiting as neat as punctuation, gleaming mackerel with the arrogance of successful ideas. An eel barrel considers revolution. The surface writes cursive plans that no one intends to read. A monkfish glowers with the face of a lapsed magistrate. Fishwives conduct an orchestra of detail. Their hands are salt-stung. Their eyes are accurate. Their voices have the final say. They measure weight, weather, and rumor with the same calm competence. Prices rise and fall like little tides. Discounts happen for stories that end well. You buy a penny loaf from a boy who carries bread like medals on a tray. The crust crackles, the steam is a kind grammar, the crumb forgives everything. You pledge a corner to your mouth and feel the day agree to continue. Cheese appears in the shape of ambition, hard, pale, tasting faintly of grass and the idea of time. A man in a felt cap, authoritative in the way of blades, sections a cod with long, decisive vowels. Another squeezes a lemon with a confidence that moves a gull to insult his hat. Traders call out like conjurers. Haddock, honest. Cockles that require no explanation. Mussels dressed for saints. You taste the air. It tastes like lunch tomorrow. A bell chimes metal to metal, the scale pan achieves a moral. A Breton counts coins as if they were pebbles. He asks you in a polite, borrowed English whether the ale is less watery than last year. You promise nothing and receive a shrug that has crossed the channel often. Somewhere between stalls you hear a prayer disguised as a joke. A tinker sings a verse he will later deny. The cat secures a smelt and pretends it was legal. A clerk in a stained hood writes in a ledger with a quill that makes a small sea of ink around each important word. The page smells of iron gall and ambition. The numbers arrange themselves into a story that will appear to be about fish. It is secretly about survival. You eat the bread in thoughtful bites. You salt it with a thumb. You lick the thumb because the sea has already claimed your mouth. And still, the sun has not chosen a position. On the quay, rope is a language franker than speech. Coils lie like sleeping serpents, smelling of tar and patience. Your fingers find a splice, tidy as a seamstress's apology. An apprentice worries a knot, learning its grammar by muscle. He says bowlin, clove hitch, something he calls the thief's knot, and pretends he knew them yesterday. The rope maker raises an eyebrow, and the apprentice's hands discover humility. Ropes talk to wood, wood talks to wind. You are allowed to overhear so long as you contribute one useful action. Etiquette on a crowded wharf is simple. It takes years to learn. You pass starboard to starboard because the pier is narrow and logic prefers symmetry. You don't shout unless wood is in danger. Even then, you address the plank, not the person. Rank exists in quiet details. How salt whitens cloth, how boots hang their tiredness, how one pretends not to see a gull. A cog from the Low Countries swings at her lines with the satisfied complaint of someone who has met weather and will tell you all about it if asked. Her hull is painted with a calm argument. Next to her, a small English boat, stout with oak and expectation, behaves like a second son. Men haul casks in a choreography of small grunts. Each grunt is a syllable in the poem of getting things done. A clerk with ink on his cuff ticks marks on a wax tablet and adds a flourish that has nothing to do with numbers and everything to do with dignity. You are offered a job for an hour. Steady the gangplank, watch the capstan. Mind the crate of onions that has ambitions toward the river. Payment. A hot cup of small beer, a heel of bread with drippings, permission to belong. You accept. Your palms learn the plank's gossip. You feel the ship's slow breathing come up through your shoes and into your legs. A sailor with a scar like a tilde lends you a mitten. Your fingers bless him without dignity. For a while, you are a useful pronoun in the harbor sentence. And still the clock, if anyone had one, would hesitate before naming an hour. The weather changes its shirt. The sun freckles the quay, then hides. A soft gray arrives that refuses to explain itself. Mist walks up from the river as if it owned the place. You pull your cloak tighter. It remembers your shoulders and decides to forgive you for the stains. The harbor's hum settles into notes you can nap to. Hammer on nail, saw on beam, ladle against kettle. Ducks punctuate the water with small commas. A dog argues with a crab and loses the debate on points but wins on elegance. The customs shed plays at Empire with wax seals the color of tiny sunsets. A man there frowns the way ledgers frown. Honest, exhausted, fair. When a name is spelled wrong, the ink itself offers apology, curling in a flourish like a gull's footprint. You drift, no walk, with purpose toward a corner where smells stack in layers. Tar first, then smoke, then fish, then bread. A woman roasts mussels in a black iron pan, whispering to them as they open. She shares one with you because you watched without envy. It tastes of the present moment and a hint of pepper stolen from a ship that pretended not to notice. A peddler passes with pins and ribbons arranged like a portable sunrise. He sells you a scrap of blue cloth that reminds the sky to be brave. You tie it to your belt and feel statistically safer. And look at that, it is still not yet noon. Lunch arrives by way of opportunism. A stew finds your hands. It is the color of honest effort. Onions that have confessed, barley that has decided to soften, herbs with a persuasive accent. A bit of fish yields its usefulness to the spoon. Steam climbs your face and arranges your expression into gratitude. You sit on a bollard that has anchored more decisions than any bishop in the county. A shared trench, bread cut open like a page, collects stories between elbows. A man from Galicia offers a slice of orange saved since Michaelmas. It tastes like the memory of weather that keeps its own calendar. He tells you, in a poem mistaken for prose, about a storm that wrote on the night with white letters and then ate its own pen. He is here, and that is the moral. You nod, because agreement is a currency with excellent exchange rates. Rituals nobody writes down knit the afternoon. You touch wood before names are spoken, not for luck but gratitude. When someone says a boat's name, 2 fingers lift to the brow. It's respect for an object that disobeys gravity. When a bell rings, you incline your head toward the church, not out of piety but because time deserves a witness. The harbor is a religion of habit in which faith means ropes will hold and soup will thicken. A boy gives crumbs to a gull and calls it charity. The gull calls it taxation. A tinker blesses a kettle with a new handle and hums as though music were a tool. A seamstress mends a sail on her lap with the speed of a prayer. The lists come out as the sun pretends to stay. Work is a lawful tyrant. Tall ships have long lists. Small boats scribble and swear. Someone must mend a net, so someone does. Fingers learn to be fish and fix what fish have done. Someone must count barrels. He counts to 20 twice, gets 19, and smiles at the arithmetic of fatigue. A boy is sent to tell the master that the sandbar has moved. The message is heavier than he is, but he carries it anyway. A clerk turns dust into letters with a stick. A is a ladder. B, 2 bellies. C, a wave that thought better of it. The boy prefers C and keeps drawing it until the stick breaks. Ink stains multiply like blessings and curses. And somehow the day refuses to accelerate. Hazards are present but civil. Planks practice treachery where fish scales have made a mirror. Hooks hide until your thumb finds them with rapid theology. A coil of rope becomes a snare if you forget to flatter it with attention. The tide steals your certainty and returns it rearranged. Mud stands up to introduce itself to your boots. Illness wears ordinary clothing. A cough that slept by the river. A stomach that debates yesterday's stew. Hands cut by salt and persuaded by the same salt to close, roughly. The wise carry wool, a knife, and a story. The knife is for oranges if God is attentive, for rope if he is distracted. The wool is for all remaining situations. The story is for the hour when the weather decides to sit on you. Today, the greatest danger is a sardine beneath your heel with ambitions toward becoming an anecdote. You decline the collaboration. You may have imagined the harbor as a painting. Sun caught in rigging like good news, sails full and cooperative, tar with the noble stink of courage, the geometry of masts clean against an obedient sky. Those are not lies, only one angle. The other angle is damp stockings and a splinter that argues doctrine with your finger, and the way fatigue places a weight in your mouth so words come out slower, truer. The romance leaves and returns on its own tide. A red hood crosses gray weather and proves color has feelings. The sun enters the harbor like a lord. Nobody stares, everybody notices. A coin changes hands and the air hushes a little because value moved. A boat returns when it might not have. A letter from Bruges arrives with the smell of a different rain, and someone holds it to their face as if letters were noses. You stand where wood negotiates with water, and you understand the border is not a line but a conversation. Men speak to ropes, ropes to wind, wind to gulls, and gulls to themselves with great success. You are a pronoun the sentence favors for now. You belong as long as you are kind to silences. Afternoon lengthens like a patient breath. The sun, with its weak winter courage, gilds the rim of barrels and pretends they are treasure. The bakehouse sends out a second batch of loaves to comfort those who missed their morning. The tavern door coughs out laughter and slams it back in to keep it warm. A fiddler in an upstairs room practices only the sad parts of a tune until the walls learn the melody and begin to hum. A washerwoman wrings cloth that remembers rivers in other countries. She says the Thames, but she means the Seine. Another woman swears her herbal tonic cured a sailor of storm fears. The sailor, present, drinks to this and claims the storm now fears him. No one is cruel enough to disagree. Clouds experiment with shapes and then lose interest. The wind sits down to rest on a pile of nets and forgets to get up. Out past the breakwater, the sea folds itself into longer thoughts, but promises not to be dramatic today. A barge brings in wool, the sacks breathing lanolin and road dust. A boy buries his face in one and re-emerges baptized. A clerk from the guild walks the quay with the serious look of a man counting future taxes. He smells of ink, new leather, and ambition that holds its head respectfully low. He pauses to examine a measure of salt, catches the light like frost and the price like a throat. He nods to no one, the nod of a man hedging bets with the weather. You rest on a coil of rope that has sworn to behave. The harbor sounds braid themselves and lay across your shoulders. The tick of cooling pitch, the pigeon gossip in the rafters, the clink of a hook, the arithmetic repeating itself in wave against stone. A foreign ship's bell answers the church bell by accident and the two negotiate a truce. The smell of smoke grows friendly as someone somewhere decides stew is an evening word. A child drops a wooden toy, a boat with a too large sail. The sail breaks. The child learns an early law, and someone repairs it with a pin and an incantation disguised as humming. The repaired boat sails again across puddles that mirror pieces of cloud. Triumph is a small word, and it fits. Supper is an argument between thrift and appetite. You compromise with a meat pie that believes more in pastry than meat and thank it for its honesty. A pot of peas surrenders to butter. You drink ale that remembers oak and a cool, brief river. A stranger tells you in a whisper shaped like a confession about spices that glow like captured daylight. Saffron, cinnamon, pepper that sneezes with authority, and you agree to be impressed even though your purse plans otherwise. He swears that in Lisbon the sea is so blue it shows you your better self. You say perhaps you'll go. He says perhaps we all will. The word perhaps tastes of wind. Shadows lengthen into certainty. Lanterns appear one by one like kindnesses nobody announced. Ropes take on their night voices. They say less more definitively. The tide returns, affectionate, and pats the stones as if to say you still belong. The gulls trade gossip for roosts. A haze of smoke throws a veil over a moon that will later make promises it intends to keep. A sailor tunes a small harp with calloused hands and plays a fragment that remembers home so precisely someone begins to cry and pretends he is not. The sound doesn't travel far. Nothing urgent, only true. You walk the edge of the quay. The posts gleam with a thin skin of water and moon. Your boot heel catches on a splinter and unlearns it. You pass the rope yard where the day's labor cools into quiet, rows and rows of sleeping muscle. The ropemaker locks the door with a key whose age is measured in gone winters. He nods at you, a nod meaning we both did enough. You nod back with the same economy. A cat escorts you 10 steps, accepts no salary, leaves you at the corner as if the town were a parcel to be delivered and you, for the moment, its address. In a small chapel near the quay, stone, stubborn, undecorated, you slip inside to borrow a few degrees of silence. Wax breathes its old honeyed breath. A saint peels at the edges and doesn't mind. Someone has left a fish on a plate because penance and humor sometimes share a mouth. You do not pray. You sit until the noise in you arranges itself into a single, bearable note. Then you go. Night performs no drama. It arrives and puts its hand on the shoulder of the town, and the town stops fidgeting. Shutters close like eyelids. The tavern glows amber behind breaths of laughter. You take one for the road and leave the rest for those who need the courage of loud company. You climb the lane. Your room waits with its slant and its good manners. The blanket is cool, the bed narrow, the pillow faithful. The harbor's thousand small heartbeats drift through the wood and into you. Water counting, ropes agreeing, wood remembering forests and forgiving ships. Your breath joins their meter. The taste of salt has become the taste of sleep. And still, somehow, it is only evening. Morning will compose itself again in a few hours with the same tools. Bell, bread, rope, weather. For now, let the door close itself. Let the candle find a smaller flame and then none. The sea will keep watch because it knows nothing else. The town will dream the work it will do again, and nobody will mind the repetition because repetition is how endurance says I love you. You feel the day leave like a tide that is not taking anything you need. Your palms remember the warmth of a plank, the sting of clean rope, the weight of coins that were mostly stories. Your ears remember the bell negotiating with time, the fishwife's verdicts, the secret fourth note of water under wood. Your mouth remembers bread that sighed and ale that acquired a personality the second time you sipped it. Your eyes remember a gull turning mid-argument and forgiving its own opinion. Your body remembers usefulness, which is the best kind of tired. Sleep comes without ceremony. It steps into your room, nods at the beam, takes your boots off your mind, and tucks in the part of you that keeps walking if nobody stops it. You drift exactly as boats do when lines hold and the tide hums the key of patience. Forward and back, the same distance, an acceptable compromise with the dark. And if you wake at some brief hour when the harbor clears its throat and the rain rehearses without committing, you'll hear it again. That mild arithmetic, that old grammar. You will smile into the dark knowing that, like the sea, you can be both endless and kind. Then you will turn your face to the wall, feel the wood's cool story against your cheek, and slip under the quiet where rope, water, and breath agree to let you go for a while. You wake before the bell decides what to call this hour. The room is a gray bowl of quiet. Your blanket slides from your shoulders like a tide withdrawing without apology. The wood under your feet is cool, clean with the faint smell of last night's smoke. You hold still and listen the way one listens to a sleeping animal. Gently, curious, prepared to forgive whatever it does next. Somewhere below, a bucket touches stone. A hinge clears its throat. The sea, always the oldest voice, counts softly under everything. You dress by memory more than sight. Wool that remembers your shape puts it back on you. Leather that has learned your gait prepares for the day's argument. Your fingers find the belt's buckle and it yields without drama. The window is beaded with a thin fur of mist. When you wipe it with the heel of your hand, the glass smears your morning into a watercolor of masts and cloud. You open the door and the house exhales you into the lane. The air outside is damp enough to drink. It tastes of iron, yeast, and that familiar undecided salt. The taste of questions that the tide will answer later. The stones glisten, soft with centuries. A cat slips under a cart and pretends not to see you. An upstairs shutter opens and a basket is lowered on a rope for bread. The rope squeaks a polite request into the quiet. From the bakehouse, a patient heat rolls out, carrying crust and steam and arguments about the price of flour you cannot hear but understand. You make for the quay without needing to think about direction. All streets here slope toward certainty. The harbor appears between buildings the way the moon appears between clouds. Suddenly, as if it had been waiting to be noticed, the water sits higher this morning, a level thought under a smooth brow. Ropes are dark with dew, their hairs standing like the whiskers of old men. A gull lands and folds itself into a question mark on a post, then yawns like a tiny door. Work has already begun in the soft, respectful register of dawn. Two men roll a cask together, speaking in grunts that could be numbers. A woman spreads damp nets over pegs, the pattern of knots repeating like a prayer she has long since stopped arguing with. A boy still young enough to run without purpose runs anyway, and an older man shouts his name as a precaution. The first bell rings, one tone, deliberate. The sound skates over water, touches your ribs, and decides to stay there. You buy bread, still warm enough to forgive impatience. The boy behind the tray gives you one that is misshapen and therefore better. You break it and steam unsettles the air. You salt the bite with your thumb because you have learned that the sea has already salted you. A sliver of cheese appears from your pocket, yesterday's plan working in today's favor. You eat standing, watching the harbor check itself for weather. A curtain of cloud has set itself low over the river mouth, and the light is the silver of a coin that has changed hands too often. The wind is not decided. It gives a little, then asks for the little back. The smell of tar warms where a caulker leans over a seam, his brush patient, his shoulders making small circles like a man whispering apologies to wood. A cooper thumps the iron hoops of a barrel, and those hollow notes ladder upward into the rafters of the world. Someone calls your name, one you are using this week, and you turn to find a sailor with eyes the particular blue of rope-blistered knuckles. He gestures at a stack of crates with the universal sign for "one more back will do." You nod. Your hands agree before your mouth does. You lift when he lifts and the crate groans like a low string. The wood's rough speaks to your skin in a language you are beginning to pick up. You carry 4 crates that way, share 5 breaths that count for more, and are paid in a cup of small beer and a story about a shoal that moved out of spite. The beer is sensible. The story improves on repetition. The fish market shakes itself awake properly now. Boards get washed with quick slaps of brine. Buckets pour little waterfalls that smell of last night and forever. Flat fish line up like coins you would never dare spend. Herring huddle glittering, an argument of silver. A barrel of eels writes cursive poems about escape plans nobody will read. The fishwives arrive as generals of economy. Their hands are courtrooms where decisions are both swift and fair. One laughs and calls you shipless, a description you accept with dignity. She slaps a haddock with affection and tells it to try harder. You drift with the stream of buyers. Dockers, wives, a friar who pretends his appetite is a theological concern. A merchant who pretends his coin has feelings. Bargaining is music. The notes are coin, fish, weight, weather, and last week's promise. A man from Flanders argues in a braid of French and English and something else. No one minds because the fish do not speak either. An argument breaks out over whether a particular cod is heroic or merely large. The cod is consulted and declines to comment. You are handed a cup of broth at some point, the gift of standing where steam believes in you. It tastes like patience and fennel, like a story with no villain. The warmth travels to your wrists and asks nothing in return. The fishwife who gave it to you nods as if confirming a suspicion she has always had. That hot liquid makes better people. You move along the quay to where ships knit themselves with their rigging. The ropes are stained with history, the knots tidy at a distance and complicated up close. An apprentice practices splices with the anxious confidence of someone who knows the master is watching from behind a barrel. The master says nothing. His eyebrows mark pass/fail in a language the apprentice reads well enough to learn from. A spar is hoisted slow, and the pulleys sing a faint song like insects in high summer. The wood eases into its place with a sound that resembles relief. Etiquette continues to make rules when nobody looks. You carry your weight slightly forward so others can step around you. You keep the line of the gangplank clear as if it were sacred, which perhaps it is. You swallow your curses and hand them to the planks to hold on your behalf. You do not stare at the coat with the best dye, because wealth here pretends to modesty and expects the same of glances. You make eye contact with dogs, because they are the only honest officials. The church bell speaks a second time, deciding this must be the hour it just rang. Pigeons burst from the nave roof and land board. A clerk scratches at his ear with the feather end of a quill and leaves himself a note. In the customs shed, a wax seal blooms red like a small sunset. A document is impressed, rolled, tied, and becomes, with that, more real than the goods it describes. Power here often travels on paper boats. Just when the clouds promise a gray that will hold, the weather remembers a lesson learned in Italy and permits a brief, superior sun. Everything changes its mind at once. Water brightens into glass. Nails flash. Brass admits its vanity. The wetbacks of fish practice being coins. Faces go from pewter to living. You squint and forgive the sky for being undecided earlier. You choose a different lane to walk, one that lets the town show another face. Here the houses lean closer. Doors have been painted in colors that began brave and surrendered to weather. Laundry beads with the salt of the morning and the rumors of last night. On a sill, a small wooden ship sails perpetually in one direction on a blue cloth sea. A girl on a stool mends a net with hands that will one day scold, and sings a tune in which a river and a boy share a name. Pot smokes by a doorway. The steam clings to your face and makes you taste onion for 3 steps. You pass the Guildhall stone square, frowning at irregularity. Inside, voices weigh wool in sentences. Outside, a man chalks the price of salt on a board, then rubs it out, thinks, and writes the same price with more confidence. A cart passes with wheels that have learned to curse under their breath. A dog trots alongside, checking on each spoke like a small inspector. Children play at ships with planks, buckets, and an arrogant cat. By the water again, you watch a keel take shape in the shipyard. Ribs bent to the will of steam and men with calm hands. The smell of hot oak is generous. A steam box coughs out a breath that tastes like ancient forest and new ambition. The shipwright's line, the long, careful curve drawn in chalk, winds across the floor like a promise only wood can keep. When a plank yields to that promise and settles into place, the men pat it the way one pats a horse after the first good mile. Not victory, companionship. You are stopped by an old woman who carries a bundle of herbs and the authority of a dozen winters. She peers into your face as if your tongue were a weather vane. "C likes you," she says, as though reporting a medical condition. She presses a sprig of something green into your hand. It smells of pennyroyal and advice. "For the fog in your head," she adds with a smile. The smile travels. You feel it appear on your face a moment later, as if your mouth had received permission. The day lengthens on all sides. You are fetched, no, invited into honest work again. Mending a torn sail while it hangs, an exercise in balance and persuasion. The cloth is stiff, stubborn with stories, but the needle learns to speak in a smaller voice and the sail agrees to listen. Your palms darken with clean dirt, the kind that proves usefulness. Someone hands you a slice of salted apple and you discover that salt can make sweetness braver. A sudden commotion near the slip turns out not to be tragedy but comedy. A barrel of eels, misadvised, has gone traveling. The street becomes a river of laughter and slippery ambition. An apprentice skids. A gull applauds. A fishwife rescues dignity with a basket. An eel thumps against your boot and moves on without apology. When the barrel is righted and the refugees persuaded, everybody resumes the exact seriousness they had before, but with better faces. It is mid-afternoon when the tavern door pulls you by scent. You had not planned to go in, but the air outside develops the taste of ale and roasted luck, and inside there is a table that will miss you if you do not appear. The sign creaks as if welcoming only certain names. Yours seems to qualify. The room accepts you with amber. Candles promise not to flicker in ways that disturb. Voices make a braid and lay it across your shoulders. You order less than hunger demands and receive exactly what comfort requires. A trencher with a stew that darkens toward kindness. A heel of bread with drippings that whisper of yesterday's meat believes in you. A mug that has remembered each hand and will forgive yours. Conversation at the next table floats toward you as if you deserved it. A man tells a story about a storm that took a mast but gave back a better crew. Another tells a quieter story about a letter that finally learned the way to the right door. Neither asks to be believed. They ask only to be carried for a while. A fiddler tunes in a corner, finds the note he had last night, and keeps it. He plays something that could be called a lament if it were not so pleased with its own sadness. The fire answers in crackles that form consonants. The ceiling beam listens. You listen, Listening is almost a profession here. You step back into the afternoon with an extra layer of warmth you did not carry in. Outside, the light has tilted toward gold. The harbor has taken off its work face and put on the one it uses for telling time with shadows. Nets hang like pages drying. The gulls go quiet for a spell, as though the day has asked for a paragraph and they, for once, agree. On the far side of the quay, a bell you do not know strikes a note you do. It is the sound that says, begin to finish. Barrels are rolled toward doors. Chalk is licked from fingers. Names are written short on slats and long in ledgers. A boy chases a hat down the lane and catches it only when it decides to be caught. The cat reappears to escort the last fish scale to the end of its story. The tide turns without ceremony. The water, satisfied with its previous point of view, decides to climb again. It pats the stairs, the stones, the barnacled bits of argument nailed to the quay. The smell of the river deepens. Estuary breath thickens the air as if a giant has leaned close to tell you a secret about silt. You walk toward the little chapel by the water because light is doing something worth telling someone about. Inside, the air is ash-cool. Beeswax keeps old afternoons in its smell. A candle guttering near a saint's thumb insists on courage. Someone has left 2 coins, a sprig of rosemary, and a fish scale shaped like a tear on the ledge. You stand until your ribs remember how kindly they can move. When you step out, the sky has been washed and rehung. Evening comes with enough cloud to earn its color. The first lanterns open their small suns. A teacher passes, writing numbers on the air for a girl who will later count in 2 languages and love the sea in both. A soldier with no war argues mildly with a sailor with too much. They negotiate to a song neither can sing. A miller returns from somewhere uphill with flour on his elbows like snow pretending to be useful. You make one last circuit of the quay, as if the day were a ship you must walk around to declare seaworthy. Each post, each coil, each stain has learned your face, or perhaps you have learned theirs. A gull lands near you and, after careful thought, decides you might be a person of character. It stands on 1 foot to see whether you will pass its test. You wish it a good night and are rewarded with disinterest, a high honor. Your room receives you the way a small harbor receives a small boat, without comment, with competence. You sit on the bed and pull your boots into the considerate dark under it. Your hands, when you lift them into the candlelight, look like they belong here. A little pitch, a little salt, a little bread. You run a cloth over your face and the water smells like the river has set aside its cleanest corner for you. You stretch your back and it thanks you with 5 unambiguous opinions. The candle writes softer light. Outside, the street practices silence incorrectly and you forgive it. Somewhere, a door closes as if it had remembered its line. Somewhere else, a bucket takes the last trip of the day and clinks applause. The sea moves its furniture in the other room of the world and tries not to wake anyone. You lie down and the bed allows you to become horizontal wisdom. You are almost asleep when the rain begins, the kind that has been thinking about it all day. It's a small, courteous rain, one that speaks only when spoken to. It finds the window, the roof seam, the sideways nail, and plays them softly. It finds the rope outside and gives it a gloss. It finds the quay and erases a line nobody wanted. You breathe with it, in the same distance, the same tide. A while later, You wake without meaning to and find that nothing has changed except the wonderful fact that nothing has changed. The room is the same kind of dark. The rain is the same kind of careful. Your body keeps the sea's rhythm even when it thinks it has forgotten how. You turn your face toward the wall and find the scent of wood and salt, a textbook written in grain, and read until sleep takes the book from your hands. When the light returns, not morning yet, but the practice of it, you dream of ropes learning your name, of fish with opinions that aren't cruel, of a bell that keeps trying to be precise and never quite manages and is forgiven anyway. You dream that the harbor writes you into the ledger under miscellaneous and circles it once in friendly ink. You dream that the tide counts you as it counts posts, boats, stones. Not more, not less, simply one of the necessary. And when the bell finally commits to an hour, long after your breathing and the sea have come to terms, you wake to the knowledge that the same day is waiting, not identical but faithful, and that you are allowed to walk inside it again, tasting salt, hearing wood, greeting gulls who have misplaced your name and will find it by mid-morning. It is a promise sufficient to make you smile with your eyes closed. You rise and the floor greets you. The room puts your shape back on the air. Outside, the harbor has already begun telling you what the weather has decided and what the ropes will accept and where the fish are considering being courageous. You tie your belt. You open the door. The day takes your hand like an old friend who is delighted, but not surprised, that you remember the way. Morning unrolls itself carefully, like a parchment too long in the damp. The sky is pale, uncertain, the color of pewter rubbed thin by fingers. Clouds drift low, almost touching the chimneys, like old thoughts that haven't yet decided to leave. You wake to a sound that is half bell, half gull, both imprecise but enthusiastic. It is, as ever, enough to begin. The air in your room smells faintly of bread and seaweed, yesterday's supper and the world's breakfast trading places. You pull on your boots, still damp at the seams, and the leather makes a soft complaint that quickly forgives itself. Your cloak, hung overnight near the candle stub, feels heavier but kinder now. It's while remembering warmth the way a cat remembers sunlight. When you open the door, the street greets you with its usual indifference. Stones gleam from last night's drizzle, and somewhere a child has already lost patience with the morning. The smell of baking rolls down the lane like gossip. A cart clatters by, pulled by a horse who clearly knows more about the town than its rider. You make your way downhill, following the inevitable pull of water. The harbor opens before you, gray and silver and alive. The tide is halfway out, the polite stage, where mud gleams but does not yet speak. Ropes hang heavy from their posts, glistening like the necks of sleeping serpents. A single sail unfurls on a distant ship, tentative, like a man testing a promise. A baker's boy passes you, carrying a tray of buns dusted with sugar so pale it might be frost. He whistles something wordless but cheerful, and you buy one without needing to ask the price. Still warm. You bite into it, and it tastes like the kind of luck that doesn't last but doesn't need to. The fishwives have begun to claim their ground for the day. They move like generals marking territory with baskets, boards, gestures. One throws water from a pail to wash her stall. It splashes your boots and she laughs, a sound sharp but not unkind. The gulls circle above, taking notes. Early again, someone says behind you. It's the cooper, barrel dust on his hands, eyes still half asleep. He nods toward the ships, already listing their needs. More work than weather. That's the order today. You answer with a small sound, half greeting, half agreement. He grins. Then you'll fit right in. You fall easily into the rhythm of the quay, the endless polite arguments between human and tide. Two men lift a spar, their voices making a kind of music between effort and trust. A woman scrubs a deck, her brush leaving small arcs that catch the light like script. A boy runs errands for no one in particular, carrying messages that are mostly excuses. The smell of pitch and tar thickens near the warehouse, sticky sweet, comforting in its own stubborn way. You stop for a moment beside a group of sailors hauling in a net for mending. The net itself seems to sigh, resigned to being patched again. One of the men, red-faced and cheerful, gestures for you to hold an edge. You do. The fibers are slick with salt and faintly warm from handling. Your fingers learn their vocabulary. Twist, pull, tie, trust. The man nods approval, the quiet ceremony of one craft recognizing another. When they finish, you sit on a crate and watch the tide finish its retreat. The harbor reveals its secret anatomy. The green ribs of pilings, barnacles like clusters of dull pearls, puddles reflecting more sky than seems possible. A crab the color of rust scuttles across a discarded plank. Somewhere in the mud, something breathes. The world, you think, is patient in all the places people are not. A bell rings from the church, not for mass, not yet, but to remind the living that they are still alive. The sound travels unevenly, caught in fog and wood, but it gets there. A pair of friars walks past, sandals wet, robes darkened at the hem. They speak quietly in Latin or maybe in English pretending to be Latin. Either way, it sounds like forgiveness wrapped in grammar. The sun, still undecided, tries a little harder. It strikes the water just enough to turn it from pewter to quicksilver. The air warms, and with it come the smells. Fish beginning to wake, bread fully awake, tar melting into morning. You pull your cloak tighter anyway. Habit resists comfort. A merchant strides past with the confidence of someone who owns the ledger and the pen. His sleeves are trimmed with fur, his boots too clean for honesty. Behind him trails a boy carrying a pouch that jingles in rhythm with every self-important step. They disappear into the customs house, leaving behind the faint smell of ink and the sharper one of intention. You find work without looking for it. Someone always needs hands. A cargo of wool has arrived from the countryside, and the bales must be unloaded before the tide decides to make decisions. You join the line, the simple choreography of lift, carry, set down, repeat. The wool smells of field and sheep and a faint note of smoke. Each bundle presses its softness into your shoulder, leaving behind a memory of warmth and weight. The foreman, a thin man with the temperament of a ledger, counts aloud in numbers that skip occasionally but never lose conviction. When it's done, he hands you a coin, dull and heavy. You bite it without thinking because everyone does. Tastes like thumbprints and honesty. You walk to the tavern for water, though you end up with ale. The light inside is dust and gold. The air is warm from bodies, the kind of warmth that has no direction but stays. The innkeeper nods, fills your cup, and returns to arguing with his wife about the cost of candles. Their quarrel has the structure of a folk song, familiar, rhythmic, eternal. You drink slowly, watching the door. People come and go like punctuation. A sailor with a new scar drinks in silence. A girl with red braids delivers stew to a table of merchants, smiling only when she turns away. At the far end, a pair of men plays dice without conviction. The sound of ivory on would marking time better than any bell. A dog wanders in, damp and dignified, and makes a slow survey of the floor. It finds a scrap of bread near your boot, eats it with ceremony, then sits beside you as if you were part of its route. You share the quiet between you. Outside, the wind begins to change its mind about direction. When you leave the tavern, the sun is higher, the fog gone to sulk inland. The sky is a brighter gray now, almost cheerful. The tide has turned again, creeping back toward the stones with its usual sense of inevitability. You watch it for a while, the slow advance, the small ripples breaking against the posts, each one sounding like agreement. A voice calls from somewhere above, a woman hanging laundry between windows. The sheets billow like sails, pale and fragrant. She laughs as the wind tangles them, curses gently, then hums to herself. The song is about a sailor, of course, and a promise that was probably sincere at the time. The melody floats down to the street, where it becomes part of the day. The afternoon is full now. The market hums, the tavern stews, the gulls argue, the sea listens. You wander without purpose and find meaning in small things. The way sunlight slides across a barrel, the sound of a cart while catching on a stone and forgiving it, the feel of your sleeve brushing a wall that remembers storms. You stop at a stall selling salt, though there's no reason to buy what you're standing in the middle of. The merchant grins. "Sea's free," he says, "but not this kind." You smile back, hand over a coin, and he pours a small bag of fine white crystals into your palm. It sparkles like caught frost. He winks. "For luck." You nod, because luck deserves politeness. Later, you sit by the water, legs dangling over the edge, watching the tide reclaim what it lent. The harbor reflects everything with exaggerated sincerity. The masts, the clouds, your own face, a little older than it was yesterday. You drop a pinch of the salt into the water, and it dissolves instantly, indistinguishable from everything else. You think about the people who pass through this place. The ones who arrive, the ones who leave, the ones who stay because they forgot why they meant to go. You wonder which you are. The sea naturally refuses to answer. It just keeps breathing. By late afternoon, the sky has begun to blush at its own persistence. The light turns honeyed, then copper, then something unnamed. The gulls grow restless again, circling with the self-importance of officials clocking out. A ship horn sounds, deep and deliberate, and the sound runs down your spine like a truth you've always known. Work slows. Laughter rises in its place. A man with a fiddle appears from nowhere, playing a tune that persuades the world to sway. Women dance with each other, skirts swirling like clouds remembering how to rain. The children clap until they forget why. Someone spills ale and apologizes to the ground. You find yourself smiling without reason, your hands tapping a rhythm you didn't realize they knew. As the sun sinks, lanterns bloom. They line the quay, trembling in the breeze, their light painting gold on wet wood. The air cools, and the smell of smoke thickens. The sea turns dark but not hostile, more like a mood than a thing. You walk once more along the harbor wall, the wind tugging gently at your cloak. The stones are slick underfoot, but familiar. You pass the chapel again. A candle flickers in its window, steadying itself with each breath of air. You pause not to pray, just to stand. The world has grown quieter. Voices have dropped to murmurs. The gulls have gone inland to dream of fish that cooperate. The tide has reached its high point and now lingers, reluctant to retreat. You breathe in smoke, salt, bread, and it fills you the way stories do, all at once, and without asking permission. When you return to your room, the candle you left burning has guttered low but survived. The blanket waits, rumpled but loyal. You sit on the edge of the bed and unlace your boots, the leather sighing in gratitude. Outside, the harbor murmurs like a sleeper turning over. You lie down, close your eyes, and let the day rearrange itself in your mind. The bread, the wool, the song, the laughter, the sea. They overlap gently, like waves. Each one fades into the next, slower and softer, until they are all one sound, the sound of the harbor breathing. You drift. The candle goes out. The tide keeps time. The world stays perfectly, mercifully ordinary, and that is enough to make it holy. Night holds the harbor the way an old hand holds a cup. Familiar, a little trembling, but certain of its purpose. The air thickens. It smells of salt and coal and that faint metallic promise before rain. The sea itself has turned dark enough to keep secrets. You hear it more than you see it. The slow rhythm of water pressing against stone. The whispering tug of tide through pilings. The small, polite collisions of driftwood and dock. Every sound in the night has edges worn smooth by repetition. The lamps along the quay burn in small halos, their light bending on mist. You walk the edge of that faint illumination, your boots clicking softly, the sound quickly swallowed. Around you, the town rests in the comfortable disarray of exhaustion. A shutter half closed, a rope coiled but not neatly, a ladder leaning as though listening to the tide. Even the gulls are gone, their voices replaced by the mutter of waves and the odd creak of timber like someone talking in their sleep. You stop near the waterline. The tide has come back in with quiet authority. The ships rise and fall in long, thoughtful motions. A lantern swings on a mast, its reflection drawing a golden line that breaks and reforms with every ripple. The smell of tar and pitch has deepened. Beneath it you can taste the sweetness of wet oak. A cat walks the edge of the dock with the elegance of something born knowing balance. It pauses beside you, considers your presence acceptable, and continues on. Somewhere behind you, a door opens, spilling a narrow path of yellow light onto the cobblestones. A voice hums briefly, then fades. The door closes. You are left with the sound of the sea, which is older and kinder than any song. You walk on. The tavern's windows glow with the last laughter of the evening. Inside, someone sings half tune, half memory. The melody slips through the cracks in the shutters and falls apart on the wind. You can almost taste the ale and smoke in the air, the comfortable fatigue of men who have worked their day into stories. The door opens and a man steps out, his boots unsteady on the wet stone. He nods at you, a wordless good night, and stumbles toward a lane that will remember him kindly. You pass the ropemaker's yard. Even sleeping, it smells of hemp and labor. The coils are stacked like resting serpents, still glistening with tar from the afternoon. You touch one absently. It gives slightly under your fingers, rough but alive with the memory of motion. A droplet of water falls from the eaves and lands on your hand. The night air cools it into clarity. The wind begins to turn. It carries the faintest hint of rain, maybe an hour away. The clouds have gathered themselves, low and soft, covering the stars like a blanket laid over an old story. You pull your cloak closer. It's heavier now, full of the day's salt, but it warms you honestly. At the far end of the quay stands the chapel, small and stubborn. Its single candle glows through a narrow window, trembling against the dark. You push the door gently. It creaks like a friendly throat clearing, and step inside. The air smells of beeswax, ash, and stone that has been listening for centuries. The floor is uneven, worn by knees and weather. You sit on a bench at the back, where shadows soften the corners of everything. A priest kneels near the altar, murmuring prayers in Latin that even heaven must hear through the filter of fatigue. His words fold into the air, blend with the sound of rain starting on the roof. First light, then serious. The candle wavers, steadying itself again. You close your eyes, not to pray, but to listen. Each drop on the roof is a word. Together they form a language you can almost understand. When you step back outside, the rain has thickened but still behaves. It paints the cobbles silver and sends small rivers running toward the sea. The harbor glows softly under it, light and shadow playing at honesty. The ropes hiss when touched by drops. The smell of everything intensifies, salt sharper with sweeter air cleaner. You walk slowly, each step making a polite splash. The water finds the seams in your boots and traces them like an old map. From a window above, someone sings again. A woman this time, voice quiet, meant only for herself. The tune rises and falls like the tide. You catch a few words about waiting and waves and someone who hasn't yet returned. You look toward the sea, but the horizon has disappeared. The world has become one long thought, perfectly still beneath the rain. You find shelter beneath the overhang of a warehouse. The wood above creaks with the weight of centuries and water. You sit on a crate and let the rain curtain the world. The sound becomes rhythm, then pulse, then background. You drift between wakefulness and dream. You see the harbor as it might have been 100 years before, or 100 years from now. Same shape, same smell, same quiet defiance. People come and go, and the sea never remembers their names but never forgets their weight. When you wake, the rain has stopped. The clouds are dissolving into a lighter gray, and a faint mist clings to the ropes like breath. The horizon is returning, tentative but curious. You stand, stretch, feel the stiffness in your shoulders from sleep and salt. The air has changed, it smells of clean beginnings. You walk toward the end of the quay, where the tide is pulling itself out again, whispering to stones. A fisherman, older than the boats he tends, stands there mending a net. He nods at you without looking up. Fair weather, he says, though there is no sign yet. You agree. In a port, faith in weather counts as intelligence. The sky grows paler by degrees. A faint stripe of gold appears behind the clouds, shy but insistent. The gulls return, their calls cracking the stillness like punctuation in an old story. One lands near your feet, shakes its feathers, and begins its day as though yesterday hadn't happened. The first bell of morning sounds from the church tower. The note is slow, deliberate, hanging in the damp air before dissolving into mist. Windows open. Smoke rises from chimneys, hesitant at first, then confident. The town wakes not all at once, but in polite succession. Door, cart, shout, laughter. You follow the smell of bread again. The baker's boy, eyes bleary but cheerful, slides a tray of loaves onto a counter that still steams from the oven. You buy one, the crust crackling under your fingers. Warm still, he says, proud of the obvious. You thank him with a nod, tear a piece free, and eat as you walk. The bread tastes of heat and hope and hands that know the rhythm of kneading. The harbor in morning light is a softer thing. The water glows a gentle silver blue, the color of forgiveness. The ships seem closer, their masts drawn clean against a sky that has decided to be kind. Men move along the decks like memories learning to be bodies again. A woman scrubs a step, singing something bright enough to make the gulls quiet for a moment. You stop by the cooper's shed. He is already at work, hammer ringing in short, neat bursts. The smell of wet wood and iron fills the air. He nods without pausing. You nod back. Words are unnecessary before breakfast. He shapes a barrel's hoop, fits it into place, and the sound of it settling is the sound of satisfaction. Nearby, a group of apprentices wrestle a sail into order. The cloth flaps and complains, the wind laughing at their earnestness. The master shouts instructions that are mostly curses disguised as advice. You offer a hand, catching one corner before it escapes entirely. Together you tame it. The master gives you a look that counts as both gratitude and assessment. The day grows into its shape. The light brightens. The market begins to bloom again, as if yesterday had been only rehearsal. Stalls open, barrels roll, prices are negotiated. You hear the word herring more often than any other. You suspect it's also used for greetings, apologies, and blessings. A man selling spices lets you smell a jar of something dark and rich, cloves maybe, or stories. He says it came from Venice, which may or may not be true. You buy a pinch anyway, more for the memory than the flavor. The scent lingers on your fingertips, sharp and sweet. You pause to watch a painter sketching the harbor. His hands move quick and sure, his eyes squinting at the line where water meets sky. It never holds still, he mutters. Good, you say, and he glances up, surprised, then smiles. He agrees, good. By noon, the sun has fully arrived. It catches on every wet surface, making the world shimmer as if freshly minted. The harbor hums with its familiar symphony. Wood, rope, voice, wave, gull. The rhythm is constant, the melody always changing. You find yourself near the edge of the quay again, where the tide is halfway in. The water laps gently against the stones, whispering the same question it asks every day, the one no one ever answers. You drop the last crumb of your bread into it, and it disappears without a ripple. For a moment, the whole harbor seems to pause, just a heartbeat, a shared inhale. Then the world resumes. The bell rings, someone laughs, a cart rattles, a gull scolds. You smile quietly to yourself. Everything continues. That, you realize, is the miracle. You turn toward the town, where the day is waiting. The smell of bread still lingers on your sleeve. The sea murmurs behind you, patient, eternal. endlessly the same and never once repeated. You walk back into the living world, and the sound of your steps joins the rhythm that has been going on long before you and will go on long after, soft, deliberate, forgiving. The light has thickened. It no longer asks permission to stay. It lies on the roofs and the decks like a low blessing. You walk among people who are already deep in their hours, their hands too full for greeting but their nods plentiful. The world has chosen a speed, deliberate, repetitive, kind, and you join it without question. The tide is steady now. Water strokes the hulls of the moored ships in long syllables. You can hear how each vessel speaks differently. Oak murmurs, pine hums, tar answers in bass tones. The harbor, taken together, is a choir in which no one bothers to harmonize, but somehow everything fits. At the rope yard, men and women twist hemp into order. The smell is sharp and green. Fibers fray, dusting the air with pale ghosts. One woman hums in time to the spinning wheel, a song too slow to dance to, perfect for work. You stop a moment to watch her fingers coax length from roughness. She sees you, smiles without stopping, and you realize she is older than the yard itself. Not in years, but in understanding. The rope she makes today will hold a ship tomorrow. The ship will travel, fail, mend, return. The rope will fray again. Nothing ends. Everything changes jobs. Further along the quay, shipwrights are building something new. The skeleton of the hull rises from the cradle like a whale deciding to breathe again. Steam hisses from the bending planks. Men lean their whole faith into the curves. The smell is fierce. Wood, pitch, iron, and the faint sweetness of sap remembering its forest. You stand back. Hammers fall in measured argument. Each strike is both sound and prayer. You can feel it in your ribs. One of the builders, a thick-armed man with a beard streaked white by sawdust, nods toward the work. She'll see Flanders by midsummer if she behaves. You ask, and if she doesn't? He grins. Then she'll see the bottom sooner than that. He laughs like someone who's buried both friends and jokes in the same tide. You wish him luck. He waves it away, says luck belongs to the weather. Beyond him, the blacksmith's shed smolders. You hear the rhythm before you see it. A heartbeat struck in iron. Sparks fall like golden rain, bright and brief. The only stars visible this close to noon. He shapes a hook, then a nail, then something you can't name. Each thing cools in a trough of water with a sigh. You think, even metal exhales here. The air shifts. A gust from the river brings the scent of tar and cloves and something else. Rumor. A ship from the south has anchored overnight. Her crew strange-tongued and sun-darkened. The dockside buzzes with speculation. What she carries, who she lost. You follow the current of curiosity toward her. Her hull is foreign, narrower, her sails trimmed differently, her wood stained darker by another sun. Ropes creak as she settles. Men in loose shirts and earrings move across the deck, shouting in words you don't understand but tone you recognize. Exhaustion, pride, hunger. One unloads a crate stamped with letters that mean nothing here. The customs clerk frowns, consults a list that probably lies, and pretends to write truth on parchment. You watch the ritual, suspicion wrapped in civility, and see how trade and prayer use the same gestures. A woman appears beside you, wrapped in a shawl the color of dusk. Her hair smells faintly of lavender and smoke. They say she brings oranges, she says, voice low but eager, and cloth thin as sighs. You smile. Do you believe it? She shrugs. I believe in the smell. She's right. There, beneath the heavier scents, something bright, citrus, faint but undeniable. The promise of a place where the light never hurries. You buy one orange when the crew begins to sell. Costs more than sense allows, but you do it anyway. The skin glows like captive sunlight. You cut it with your knife and the scent opens the air. The juice is sharp, startling. A flavor that doesn't belong to this climate. You lick your fingers and taste travel. The woman laughs softly. First one's always worth it. She takes a wedge when you offer. Reminds you the world's bigger than your street, she says. You nod. And smaller than it pretends. She smiles. That too. The two of you stand quietly while sailors argue with paperwork and the tide pushes against the dock. Impatient. When she leaves, you keep the orange peel in your pocket. The scent will survive longer than memory. The afternoon leans toward warmth. The fog of morning has retreated to sulk somewhere inland. The sea gleams, a sheet of beaten tin. You walk past a stall selling dried herbs, thyme, marjoram, mint, their fragrances mingling into something both garden and ghost. The merchant tells you, without invitation, which plants keep sailors calm and which convince rats to leave a ship early. You buy a small bundle of lavender for sleep. He wraps it in parchment and ties it with string that smells of ink. Near the water's edge, children play with boats carved from scrap wood. They chase them with sticks, guiding them through puddles left by the tide. Their laughter rings against stone and rope, pure and brief. A boy's boat capsizes. He scolds it, rights it, and blows on the sail as though breath itself were a wind. You watch until the noise of work swells again and the moment folds into the day. You stop to rest by a stack of barrels. The sun warms your back. A pair of gulls quarrels nearby over a scrap of something unidentifiable. Their argument is shrill, eternal, and oddly reassuring. A ship's bell rings the half hour. Somewhere, a woman calls for her husband. Somewhere else, a man curses his shoe. All of it fits. You eat your lunch sitting there, bread, a sliver of cheese, the last of the orange. The salt in the air makes everything taste truer. You chew slowly, watching a fishing boat ease away from the dock. Its wake breaks the reflections of clouds, turning them into silver fragments. You wonder whether the men aboard see the same sky you do, or a different one entirely. The shadows shorten, then stretch again. Time moves like the tide, forward, backward, both at once. You feel it on your skin, in your bones. The harbor's pulse is inside you now, an adopted heartbeat. A commotion stirs near the warehouse. Two traders arguing in 3 languages, their gestures large enough to cast shade. One waves a parchment. The other waves both hands and probably an insult. The crowd watches, amused, until a clerk intervenes with the calm of one who has seen too many versions of the same story. The voices drop, coins change hands, balance is restored. Commerce and forgiveness are siblings here. The afternoon wears on. The light deepens, thick as ale. Workers gather their tools, tying them with rope or slipping them into cloth bags that smell of sweat and safety. A cart of wool creaks past, the driver humming a hymn that never quite finds its tune. The bell rings again. a lazy, end-of-shift sound. You walk with the slow river of people returning from docks to homes, the language of fatigue spoken fluently by all. The tavern begins its second life. The smell of stew and smoke floats through the door like rumor. A boy sweeps the threshold. The broom moves with theatrical effort. You promise yourself only one drink, knowing promises made to ale are not binding. Inside, the warmth wraps you immediately. The low ceiling gathers the air close. Beams darkened by time lean in as if listening. The room hums with laughter not yet tired. You take a seat near the wall. The innkeeper recognizes you, nods, fills a mug before you can ask. The ale tastes like the color brown would taste if it had a soul, earthy, bitter, forgiving. At the next table, a sailor tells a story about the sea turning green in a storm, so bright it seemed to glow from beneath. His companions argue over whether that's magic or moonlight. You listen not because you believe it, but because belief isn't the point. The story itself is a kind of shelter. A fiddler tunes his instrument, plucks a string, then begins a tune so gentle that even the fire seems to hush to hear. The melody is round, like the motion of waves, simple and endless. People hum along quietly. The music asks nothing more. You close your eyes, and for a moment, everything inside you moves with that rhythm. The sea, your pulse, the air itself. When you step outside again, the sun has started its descent. The sky burns gold at the edges and bruises toward violet above. The harbor glows as though lit from within. The ships are silhouettes now, their masts drawn in ink against fire. The water, finally calm, mirrors everything with devotion. The gulls return, fewer now, quieter. They circle the masts once, then drift inland toward rooftops and safer dreams. The first lanterns flicker to life, their reflections stretching long across the wet cobbles. Smoke from the tavern curls upward, mixing with the last light. Somewhere, a bell rings one slow, perfect note, not to signal anything, just to remind the world of itself. You walk the length of the quay once more. Each board, each stone, each post seems to recognize you in passing. The tide, high again, laps almost at your boots. You pause at the edge and look out over the water. The horizon is fading into itself, a single long breath between day and night. You take the bundle of lavender from your pocket and untie it. The scent rises, mingling with salt and smoke. You drop it into the sea, an offering perhaps, or simply a gesture. It floats for a moment, pale and fragrant, then drifts away. Behind you, the town settles. Voices fall to murmurs. Doors close. The air cools. You turn toward the lane that climbs the hill, your cloak heavy with salt and light. The sound of the sea follows, a heartbeat made of distance. When you reach your room, you light a candle. This flame wavers, catches, steadies. You sit by the window. The harbor below gleams faintly, a constellation of lanterns and ripples. Somewhere a dog barks once, decides better, and sleeps. You sip the last of your ale, still warm from your hand. The world outside is patient. The world inside matches it. You lie down. The bed accepts you like an old friend too tired to ask questions. The candle burns lower. The flame makes small gestures against the wall, the language of goodbye. You watch until it folds into smoke. Darkness takes its place, and the sound of the tide finds your breathing again. You think of rope and rain and oranges, of voices that worked all day and now dream in salt. You think of how the sea forgives everything by remembering nothing. You think of how tomorrow will look exactly the same and feel entirely new. Then you stop thinking altogether. Outside, the harbor turns in its sleep. The water sighs. The wind adjusts its grip on the masts. Everything continues. The night keeps watch. You drift, slow and sure, in the same rhythm, a tide of your own. You wake to sound before you wake to light. With speaking, wind testing shutters, the harbor rehearsing unease. The walls of your room hum quietly, not frightened, just aware. The air smells heavy, wet iron, seaweed, and the sharp tang that comes when weather is thinking too loudly. You sit up, feel the floor shiver once underfoot, a small tremor from the world's lungs. Outside, dawn is gray and restless. Clouds tumble low over the roofs, a moving ceiling of smoke. The wind catches at corners, lifts scraps of hay, teases door hinges into song. The gulls fly higher than usual, not shouting now, just circling, wary of the sky. You tie your cloak close and step into the lane. The first breath of air hits you like advice. Cold, direct, honest. It smells of far places. The tide has climbed higher than you expect. The quay shines slick and nervous. Men are already there, checking lines, tightening knots, watching the sky with expressions that can't decide between awe and irritation. Blowin' from the west, one says, tugging at a rope. She'll turn by noon. Another shakes his head. By noon she'll be here proper. You stand with them a moment, watching the water shift from pewter to steel. The surface moves in tight, short breaths, small waves breaking against the stones with impatient energy. Out beyond the breakwater, the sea looks darker, alive with shapes. You can feel it in your ribs. A shout, a loose sail snapping like a slap. Men run toward it, their movements quick but practiced. The wind picks up the smell of tar and sweat and throws it down the street. You help where you can, pressing your shoulder against a barrel that threatens to wander, steadying a crate that has decided to roll. The harbor, usually a slow conversation, becomes a chorus of commands. Rain begins in the smallest way, a mist first, then droplets fat as coins. It patters against your hood, runs down your sleeves, pools in the cracks between cobbles. The world shines. The sound is constant, hypnotic. You look up and the sky is the color of iron left in the rain too long. The storm doesn't arrive all at once. It slides in, polite at first. The wind shifts again, colder now, sharper. The tide climbs another hand's width. The waves that touch the quay make small, urgent sounds. Not anger yet, but insistence. The ships pull at their lines like restless horses. Best tie her twice, someone mutters. A rope slaps your arm, stinging through the fabric. You grab it, help the man beside you loop it around the post. Your fingers are raw, the hemp biting into skin. The man grins through the rain. That's the sea telling us who's boss, he says, and knots the line tighter. By mid-morning, the wind is a presence. It fills your ears, your cloak, the space between words. Carries salt straight into your eyes until the world blurs. The harbor becomes all motion. Ropes singing, sails thrashing, doors banging open and shut like impatient mouths. The church bell rings once, then again, startled by its own echo. A child runs past, chased by his mother's voice. A dog skids, slides, finds its dignity again. The air smells electric, full of salt and thunder. You can feel the charge of it along your arms. And then the storm speaks clearly. The rain thickens, falling at an angle, each drop a needle. The sky leans closer. The sound is one long note that contains every other sound. You take shelter under a warehouse eave, though the rain finds you anyway. The boards above groan, the wind pressing against them like a hand testing a door. Across the quay, a barrel breaks loose, rolling until a man stops it with a laugh that sounds almost brave. Lightning flickers over the sea, quick, silent, then followed by a thunderclap that seems to land inside your chest. For a moment, the harbor is silvered, every droplet frozen mid-fall, every face carved in light. Then it all moves again, faster. The ships sway but hold. The ropes strain but sing. The sea throws spray over the wall, a cold baptism. You breathe it in salt, rain, fear, exhilaration. Through it all, the townspeople work, not panicked but practiced. They move in pairs, securing shutters, lifting crates, guiding water away from doors. No one shouts more than necessary. The sea is loud enough. Hours pass in the strange way storm hours do, uncounted, elastic. You lose sense of where you end and the weather begins. The rain becomes part of your cloak, your hair, your breath. Your hands ache from holding, but you don't let go. And then, as quietly as it began, the storm grows tired of itself. The rain slows, first to a drizzle, then to a hesitant mist. The wind sighs, deciding to forgive. The waves flatten, murmuring apologies against the stones. The light changes. Pale gold sneaks through the cloud, touching the wet surfaces, finding beauty in exhaustion. People step out from doorways. The silence is startling. The air smells scrubbed. A rope drips steadily into a puddle, counting seconds. Somewhere, someone laughs. A small, shaky sound that spreads easily. You walk along the quay. The world glistens, rinsed of its dust and pride. The ships rest, damp and docile. A torn sail flaps weakly, its edges lit by sunlight. You help lower it, fold it, smooth the fabric between your palms. The cloth smells of salt and relief. A boy crouches near the water, poking at something with a stick. You lean to see. A cluster of tiny fish, trapped in a puddle left by the tide. He looks up at you. They'll live if the sea comes back soon. You nod. It always does. You walk on, boots squelching softly. The mud holds your footprints with gentle precision. Above, the clouds pull apart like theater curtains. The sky reveals a shade of blue so clean it seems improbable after the gray. Gulls return, cautious but curious. Their calls sound newly minted. At the far end of the harbor, you find the old rope-maker sitting outside his shed, his lap full of damp twine. He nods toward the sea. She only shouts when she's lonely, he says. Now she's had her say. You sit beside him. The bench is wet, but comfort is not always dry. Does she always forgive? You ask. He smiles, eyes on the horizon. Always, but never quickly. The two of you watch the tide creep back in, gentle now, apologetic. The water glimmers under the returning sun. It reaches the lowest step of the quay, pauses, and then comes again. Its patience is endless. By late afternoon, the town has begun to rearrange itself. Doors open, goods are checked, laughter grows confident again. The tavern spills its warmth onto the street, steam rising from freshly mopped floors. Someone wrings a rag from the rain barrel and hangs it to dry. The smell of bread returns, miracle, routine, same thing. The church bell rings once, this time on purpose. The sound carries cleanly through the air, unbroken by wind. You realize how much you've missed hearing something as simple as a single note. You walk toward the breakwater, where the stones are slick but shining. The sea stretches beyond, bright and newly calm. The horizon is a single, thin line, honest and infinite. A piece of broken mast floats nearby, its surface carved with barnacles and luck. You push it gently with your boot until the tide claims it. A fisherman passes, his coat steaming in the sun. "She's done sulking," he says, meaning the sea. You nod. "We all do eventually." He grins, keeps walking. By the time the sun begins to lower, the harbor looks almost innocent again. The wet cobbles gleam like silver coins. The ropes, freshly tightened, hang with quiet pride. The air tastes of rain turned sweet. You can feel the exhaustion of everything, buildings, people, sky, but it's the good kind, the kind that belongs to survival. You find yourself sitting on a post, watching light shift over the water. Every ripple catches gold. The world feels both heavier and cleaner. You think of all the things the sea has taken and all the things it has returned. You think of how everything alive learns to bend. Behind you, a woman hums while hanging out a line of wet clothes. The wind lifts the fabric, drying it into motion. The sound of her voice carries easily. It's the same tune she sang yesterday, only slower, softer. As if even the melody has learned humility. You close your eyes. The warmth of the sun presses gently against your eyelids. The harbor breathes. Somewhere a door closes, somewhere else a gull lands, and the tide keeps its promise. In, out, in again. When you open your eyes, the light is golden, the kind that makes everything look like forgiveness. The day edges toward evening again. The smell of smoke begins to drift from hearths. The world, washed and weary, resumes its rhythm. You walk home through the soft hush left behind by the storm. The cobbles are almost dry now. They click under your boots like polite applause. A child's laughter echoes from a doorway. A dog shakes itself clean beside a puddle. The air holds warmth the way memory holds kindness. Back in your room, you hang your cloak to dry. The candle burns steady, its flame reflected in the damp window. Outside, the sea is calm again. A gray-blue mirror holding the faint blush of sunset. The gulls have settled. The ropes no longer complain. You sit by the window, hands wrapped around a cup of ale gone warm, and watch the last of the light slide away. The storm feels distant already, like something the world dreamed and then forgot. You think of how easily the sea returns to stillness, and how difficult that can be for people. The tide whispers against the stones, a lullaby older than language. You breathe with it. The candle flickers, steadies, flickers again. By the time darkness settles, the only sounds are the ones that have always been there. The faint sigh of wood, the murmur of water, the soft exhale of wind through rope. You lie down, eyes half open, and let the quiet move through you. The harbor sleeps. The sea forgives. The world continues. You dream of ropes uncoiling into stars, of ships made of light, of gulls turning into letters that spell the same word again and again. Return. And when morning comes, soft, patient, inevitable, you will rise to the same sound as always, the sea reminding you that it has kept watch. You wake to quiet that feels deliberate, a silence earned, not given. The storm has washed the world, and now everything smells new, though it is all the same: salt, wet rope, oak, the faint sweetness of yeast rising in unseen rooms. The air against your skin is cool, but with no sharpness left in it. Even the wind seems to tiptoe, careful not to disturb what's resting. You dress slowly. Each motion feels heavier after the noise of yesterday, as though your limbs haven't yet learned to trust the calm. The boots you left by the hearth are stiff, their leather still remembering rain. You tug them on, and the sound they make, that small, stubborn creak, feels like proof that the world has survived. The blanket, half slid from your bed, still carries the smell of lavender from the bundle you threw into the tide. You smile. The scent has traveled back to you. When you open the door, the air greets you with a cool brush to the face, like the world saying good morning but unwilling to wake too fast. The street shines faintly, cobbles slick in patches, catching fragments of the pale sun. The town still looks half dreaming, shutters opened only halfway, smoke curling hesitantly from chimneys, doors propped ajar as though uncertain if they should stay that way. You step out and feel the damp rise from the stones through your soles, soft and not unfriendly. The harbor below glows with that strange stillness that follows a storm. Everything too clean, too bright, too aware of its own edges. Water laps quietly against the quay, no longer demanding attention, just existing. The masts move gently, lazy after their performance. Ropes hang heavy and dark, their knots glistening like fresh ink. You can almost hear the ship sigh, their work postponed by exhaustion. You walk down the slope, passing the baker's open window. Inside, the boy yawns as he shapes dough into rounds, his hands moving from habit rather than thought. The smell is miraculous: warm yeast, faint smoke, something that could easily be mistaken for hope. You buy a loaf before he's finished stacking them. He doesn't bother to count change. He knows you'll be back tomorrow, and the balance will even itself. At the bottom of the lane, the first gull of the morning cries out, not loudly but with conviction. It perches on the post nearest the water, shakes itself dry, and looks offended by the sun. You laugh quietly. The sound of your own voice surprises you. It feels louder than it should in this soft air. The quay is busy in that slow, deliberate way that comes after weather. People move like thoughts, careful and unfinished. They carry ropes, buckets, boards, always stopping to look at what the sea has left behind. A plank, a tangle of weed, a barrel with a bite taken out of it, a miracle or two. The mud is full of treasures today. Small shells, bits of glass polished to cloudiness, the skeleton of a fish arranged like delicate writing. The cooper is already at his work. His hands move with quiet pride, tightening the hoops on a cask that somehow survived the night upright. He looks up, squinting into the new light. Could have been worse, he says. It usually could, you answer. He grins, the expression of a man who's lived long enough to find that satisfying. Aye, and that's how we know we're lucky. You pass the rope maker's shed. Yesterday's puddles have turned to mirrors. Inside, lengths of rope hang like sleeping serpents drying in rows. The old man sits outside, sharpening a knife with a rhythm so slow it could be mistaken for rest. "Storm's done," he says, not looking up. "For now." He nods. "That's the best kind of done." You stop to help him lift a coil too heavy for one set of shoulders. The hemp smells sharper now, rain clean, its fibers gleaming in the light. You can feel yesterday still inside it. Tension, salt, the faint tremor of wind. "She sang loud," he murmurs. "Did you listen?" "Always." He smiles, toothless but bright-eyed. "She doesn't shout for nothing." You move on. A group of boys are hauling debris from the shore, dragging driftwood into piles. They turn it into a game, shouting whenever one piece looks particularly heroic. A dog supervises, barking with bureaucratic efficiency. Every splash they make seems smaller than it did yesterday, as if the sea has agreed to stay polite for a while. The church bell rings softly, the sound wandering lazily through the air. Its tone seems lighter, as if the metal itself has forgiven something. People pause to listen, some out of habit, others out of gratitude. No one hurries to the door. Prayer today is the work already being done. By mid-morning, the sun pushes through properly. The sky turns the color of tin warmed in the hand. The water glitters like something showing off. The gulls find their courage again, swooping, scolding, demanding. The harbor's rhythm returns. Footsteps on planks, shouts to the rigging, the deep cough of a boatman testing an oar. The smell of pitch rises as shipwrights resume patching, their hammers tapping small, forgiving rhythms into the boards. You stop by one of them, a woman with hair bound under a red kerchief, her hands black with tar. She's fixing a cracked plank, the nails shining like small decisions. "She held," you say, nodding toward the boat. "I," she answers, hammering once, twice. "Wood knows more about survival than we do." She wipes her brow with the back of her hand, leaving a black streak across her face. The sea's a fine teacher, demanding but fair. The air smells warm now, pine, salt, the faint perfume of drying ropes. Children laugh in the distance. Someone whistles a tune too old to have a name. The sea, content, hums softly in agreement. You walk to the edge of the pier and sit. The stones beneath you are still damp, but they hold the sun's new heat. The tide has begun its patient return. Small waves fold themselves around the pilings. The sound of it matches your breathing before you notice. For a while you do nothing. You watch the horizon where the sky becomes water without ceremony. The storm has left a strange clarity there, as if the air itself has been rinsed of doubt. The world feels wider and somehow more local at the same time. A merchant passes behind you, dictating to his clerk. His voice is brisk, purposeful, already calculating the next shipment, the next risk. You catch fragments, wool, barrels, Bruges taxes. You smile to yourself. The storm lasted one day, but his worry will last until the next one. Some things weather cannot change. You wander the market again. The stalls are fewer today. Some merchants stayed home to dry their wares, but those who came are generous with their voices. The fishwives sing their prices louder, as if compensating for the absentees. One of them holds up a gleaming herring. "Caught it before the sea caught us," she boasts. You buy two, not because you need them, but because her laughter makes the morning brighter. At a nearby table, a man sells candles shaped like ships, small, perfect, absurd. You buy one. He wraps it in paper that smells faintly of honey. "For when the sea forgets to be polite again," he says, smiling. You nod, tuck it carefully into your pocket. The baker's boy runs past, waving a burnt loaf above his head like a trophy. Behind him, his master shouts something that sounds like affection disguised as anger. You catch the boy's eye. He grins, unrepentant. You remember being that light once, though maybe only for an hour. The afternoon grows soft, golden at the edges. The wind returns from its nap, gentle this time. The tide hums a lullaby under the pier. The ships, newly trimmed, rock in small contented motions. A sailor leans on a rail, pipe between his teeth, eyes half closed. You think he might be listening to the same thing you are, the sound of a world remembering itself. You wander past the tavern. Its door is propped open to let out the heat. The smell of stew, beer, and wet wood mingles in the air. Inside, voices weave through each other. Tired, relieved, half celebrating. A fiddler is tuning his strings again, humming under his breath. You step in for a cup of ale. It's darker than yesterday, stronger, a reward for persistence. At the next table, an old woman tells a story about the storm. In her version, the sea spoke directly to her through the chimney and asked for a loaf of bread in exchange for mercy. She claims she threw one in the water and the wind stopped. Everyone laughs, but no one calls her a liar. Some things are truer than truth. You finish your drink slowly. The tavern feels smaller today, cozier. The laughter is easy. No one talks of what was lost, only what was mended, what survived. The fiddler finds his melody at last, something gentle, round, circular. You recognize it as a song that has always existed and always will. When you step outside, the light has shifted again. Evening gathers itself on the horizon. The clouds are pinked at their edges, glowing faintly as they slide toward gray. The air smells sweet with wood smoke and cooked fish. Lanterns begin to bloom along the quay, their reflections trembling in the water. You walk the length of the harbor once more, slowly, as though measuring the distance between yesterday and today. Everything has changed, and nothing has. The planks beneath your boots are still damp, still faithful. The ropes are still talking softly to each other. The tide is still reciting its ancient, circular prayer. You reach the end of the pier and stand there. The sea stretches out before you, wide and unrepentant. It does not apologize for yesterday. It does not need to. You inhale deeply, salt, smoke, light, and exhale something heavier than breath, lighter than thought. Behind you, a gull cries once, then falls silent. The sound carries, dissolving into distance. You close your eyes, listen until it's gone. The world feels perfectly balanced, half sound, half quiet. You turn back toward the town. The lanterns flicker, warm and human against the cool air. Someone calls for a friend. Someone laughs. The harbor, newly ordinary, seems miraculous for precisely that reason. When you return to your room, the candle on the table waits, still wrapped in its honey paper. You light it, The flame burns steady, small, calm, like the sea deciding, for one night, to stay kind. You sit by the window. Outside, the tide touches the quay with gentle fingers, testing, remembering. The light from your candle reflects faintly on the glass. A second, smaller moon. You watch it flicker in time with the water. And as night folds itself over the town once more, you feel a soft certainty settle in your chest. The kind that doesn't need words. The world, battered and bright, continues its slow labor toward morning. And you, part of it now, breathe with it. The sea forgives. The town endures. The ropes dry. The gulls sleep. And somewhere in all that patience, so do you. The year has begun to lean. The mornings come later now, stretching their limbs before they commit to light. The sky hangs low, brushed with smoke. The color of tin left too long in salt air. The gulls cry sharper, quicker, as if afraid of wasting sound. When you wake, the chill in the room is polite but insistent. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders before even reaching for the door. The first breath of the day carries autumn. Apples bruising sweetly, damp wood, and the faint ache of the sea cooling down. The harbor smells older in this light. Fish, salt, tar, yes, but also something drier. Leaves turning to dust inland, the sharpness of rope stiffening with cold. The tide lies lower, quieter, its rhythm slower, its voice deeper. You walk toward it, boots scuffing on stones that have learned to stay slippery. At the quay, everything feels familiar and slightly changed. The sun, when it appears, comes at an angle, catching on brass buckles, knife blades, water seams. Men's breath hangs like smoke as they talk, each word visible for a moment before disappearing. The gulls will overhead, white against the pale sky, their wings cutting through the wind like knives through linen. The baker's boy has learned to wear mittens now, one missing a thumb. He grins anyway, holding out a loaf still steaming, its crust dusted with flour like early snow. You break it in half and hand him a piece. For luck, you say. He nods solemnly, then runs off before the steam can escape. The bread warms your hands, your breath, the space behind your teeth. The fishwives have traded their summer laughter for sharp efficiency. Their baskets are smaller, their coats thicker. One slaps a fish onto the board so hard it echoes down the quay. Winter's coming, she says, as though that explains everything. And of course it does. You nod, hand her a coin, and she gives you 2 mackerel wrapped in yesterday's news. Eat before the frost, she adds, motherly even to strangers. You wander toward the shipyard, where sawdust sticks to your boots like pale frost. The smell of pine is strong enough to taste. A new hull rises there, wide, square-bellied, built for carrying grain rather than glory. Men work slowly, not from laziness but caution. Cold wood splits easier. The hammers ring sharper in the chill air, each strike clean and high, a note that carries all the way to the chapel bell. The shipwright, a woman with arms roped in muscle, nods when she sees you. Good weather for oak, she says, spitting into her palm before setting another nail. Bad for hands. She holds hers up, raw, red, strong as honesty. You nod. She grins. That's the price of keeping things afloat. Farther down the quay, you pass the ropemaker's yard again. The old man's apprentice works the wheel now, his face serious, his fingers quick. The smell of hemp and oil fills the air. He's gone inland, the boy says when you ask for the old man. Said the wind talks too much here in autumn. You smile. He's right, you answer. But she's good company if you let her. The boy laughs, surprised, then turns back to his rope. The wind strengthens by noon, picking up leaves from somewhere unseen, tossing them along the quay like errant letters. They skitter over barrels, across decks, into the water, where they spin briefly before sinking. The sea absorbs them without comment, as it does everything. A bell rings from the chapel, the noon mark, dull but steady. Smoke rises from the tavern chimney, curling thin and white. You follow the scent. Ale, onions, warmth. Inside, the room feels smaller than you remember, but that might just be the season closing in. The fire pops. The walls glow faintly. Men sit close, shoulders touching, mugs steaming. Conversation hums low and pleasant, punctuated by laughter and the clink of pewter. You take your place by the window. The glass is fogged, the outside world a watercolor of gray and gold. The innkeeper brings a bowl of stew, thick and brown, smelling of barley and patience. You eat slowly, spoon by spoon, letting the warmth spread. Each bite carries something honest. Onion, salt, a hint of smoke from the fire. You drink ale after it, darker than summer's brew, and the bitterness feels like gratitude. At the next table, two sailors play a game with pebbles and whispered rules. One swears softly when he loses, then laughs, unbothered. An old woman mends a net by the hearth, her fingers moving with quiet certainty. She hums under her breath, and the fire keeps the beat. The tune reminds you of rain, though it hasn't fallen yet. When you step back outside, the light has changed again. Afternoon has put on its copper cloak. Shadows lengthen across the cobbles, thin and clear. The tide is halfway in, patient and measured. Its color now is deep green, streaked with bronze where the sunlight touches it. You watch it rise against the stones, hear the faint hiss of water smoothing itself into cracks. A gull lands near you, one leg tucked, its feathers ruffled by the wind. It looks at you as though considering conversation. You toss it a crumb of bread, tilts its head, unimpressed but accepting. The crumb vanishes. The gull stays, companionable in its arrogance. You walk the length of the harbor. Every sound feels closer now, with creaking, rope rubbing, boots scuffing. The world seems smaller, wrapped tight around its own warmth. You think of how this town, this sea, this air all prepare for winter without ever saying so. No one makes speeches. They just keep working, tightening, mending, waiting. At the far end of the quay, a small group gathers around a fire built in a barrel. Its smoke smells faintly of resin and comfort. You stop to warm your hands. A boy roasts chestnuts on a flat stone, his face glowing orange in the light. He offers you one and you take it. The shell burns your fingertips. The nut inside is sweet and soft. You nod your thanks. He shrugs, shy, then feeds the fire another handful. Sparks rise, scattering like short-lived stars. The wind carries laughter from somewhere inland. The air tastes sharper now, edged with evening. You turn to look at the horizon. The sky has gone lavender, streaked with pale fire. The sun drops quietly into the sea, leaving behind a thin gold line that trembles before fading. The first lanterns light along the quay, their reflections wavering in the darkening water. A man stands at the edge, tossing crumbs to the fish that circle below. They say if you feed them, the sea remembers your kindness. He tells you without turning. You smile. And if you don't? He shrugs. She remembers that too. You stand beside him for a while, tossing your own crumbs. The fish rise, silver flashes in the gloom. Their movements are small miracles, brief, perfect, unrecorded. The air cools quickly after sunset. The wind shifts inland, carrying the smell of wet earth and the faint sweetness of crushed apples. Somewhere up the hill, a dog barks once, then stops. The harbor settles into its evening murmur, wood shifting, water lapping, voices thinning. You return to your room slowly, the lantern light following you like gentle punctuation. The street feels older tonight, the cobbles shining with dew, the windows glowing amber. You pass the baker's house. Through the window, you see him kneading dough by lamplight, his movements steady, prayer-like. You pass the chapel. A single candle burns before the altar, small but sure. Your own door greets you with its familiar complaint. Inside, the air smells faintly of salt and smoke and wool. You set your bread on the table, light your candle, and sit by the window. Outside, the harbor glimmers faintly under a pale moon. The tide has risen again, washing away the day's footprints. You break a piece of bread, eat slowly. The warmth from the flame touches your face. The quiet presses close, but kindly. The world feels smaller, softer, the edges blurred by night. You think of the storm, the calm, the mending, of the rope dust smell of the ropemaker's yard, of the orange you once ate on a day too bright for this season, of laughter and hammers and wind, of how every tide, no matter its temper, always returns to peace. Outside, the water sighs, a rope creaks, a gull mutters in its sleep. You close your eyes. The candle hums. The sea, the town, the air, all of them breathing together, slow, even, endless, and you still part of it. The year has folded itself neatly into cold. Mornings arrive late now, soft and gray, hesitant to commit. The first light creeps along the floor like smoke, not golden, but silver, thin as breath. When you wake, your room holds the chill in its corners, polite but stubborn. The blanket smells faintly of wool, salt, and something faintly sweet, the ghost of autumn fires. You sit up, see your breath in the air, and smile at the honesty of it. Outside, the harbor wears frost like a new religion. The ropes are stiff with it, glittering pale under the dim sky. The stones shine slick and hard, each step careful by necessity. The air bites the inside of your nose, a clean, metallic taste. Even the gulls sound subdued, their cries softer, more thoughtful. The sea itself is slower, not frozen, not yet, but deliberate. Its color has deepened into slate, and every ripple moves as if weighed with thought. You pull your cloak close and step out into the morning. The wind finds every gap it can and whispers through them, cold but not cruel. The smell of smoke threads through the salt air, pine, oak, a little coal from the richer homes. You can hear hammers again, but they sound different in this cold, sharper, smaller, each strike making a ghost of its own. Down at the quay, people move less and think more. Every task requires persuasion. The barrels are harder to lift. The ropes bite fingers raw. The nets freeze into lace if left unwatched. Yet no one complains. Complaints are a summer luxury. Winter teaches thrift of words, warmth, breath. The baker's boy has grown into gloves now, one patched with blue thread. He waves with his elbow, his hands too occupied with the tray he carries. The bread he sells is darker these days, heavy with rye and molasses, made for endurance. You buy one loaf, its crust warm and hard as bark. The smell alone feels like food, cold enough to make saints swear. The boy says, cheerful in spite of everything. You nod, and sinners sing. He laughs, a cloud of white breath in the air. A fisherman passes with a line of small cod strung like notes on a gray string. His beard holds frost. His boots leave black marks on the white crust of the quay. Sea's stingy this week, he mutters. Too cold for fish, too smart for nets. You ask if he'll go out again tomorrow. He shrugs. If the tide remembers my name. You walk along the edge of the harbor. Ice feathers the puddles where the tide retreated. Each crack underfoot sounds crisp, final. The smell of the sea has changed. Leaner, drier, touched by iron. Somewhere, a dog barks once, muffled by the fog that clings to everything. The sound travels strangely, folding back on itself. At the shipyard, the great hulls stand still, half-shrouded in canvas. The builders work inside now, hammers muffled, sawdust mingling with frost. The smell of pine and tar is stronger than the wind. You stand by the door, watching a man smooth a plank with slow, even strokes. Wood don't like the cold, he says without looking up. Cracks if you rush it. He pauses, spits, wipes his blade. People too. A few steps farther, you find the rope maker's shed shut tight. The wheel outside stands motionless, rim rimed with frost. A crow perches on it, feathers puffed against the cold. It watches you with the calm disinterest of something that has already seen spring and knows it will come again. You nod to it. Soon, you say aloud. The bird tilts its head, then looks away, as if agreeing but unwilling to show it. The tavern opens later now. When it does, the light spills out like liquid amber into the gray. You go in, if only for warmth. The room smells of wood smoke, ale, and wet wool. The fire crackles with the tired cheer of a worker who knows the job will never end. You sit near it, hands open to the heat. The innkeeper brings a cup before you ask. Cider this time, steaming, sharp with cloves and something stronger. You sip it and feel the burn climb slowly up your throat. Best medicine, he says, polishing a mug that doesn't need it. For what? You ask. For everything, he answers and moves on. The talk around the room is quieter in winter. People sit closer, voices lower. Stories shrink to fit the season. A man tells of a ship trapped in ice farther north. Another swears he saw seals under the pier. A woman near the hearth hums as she knits, her needles clicking like small bones. The sound is oddly comforting, a heartbeat made of habit. You finish your cider, the sweetness lingering on your tongue. The firelight wobbles against the window pane. Outside, snow has begun to fall. Not much, just enough to blur edges, soften corners. The air beyond the glass looks thick, dreamlike. You stay until your coat steams and your hands remember how to be hands again. When you step back outside, the world has changed. The harbor lies under a dusting of white, every surface touched with silence. Footprints mark the paths between doors. The rest is untouched. The sea itself is darker now, a mirror of the sky. Snowflakes land on it, vanish instantly. The sound of the tide has dulled, as though wrapped in wool. You walk slowly along the quay, your boots squeaking in the fresh snow. Each exhale fogs before you, then disappears into the air. The town feels smaller, closer, a collection of lanterns holding back the night. Smoke drifts upward from chimneys, slow and certain. Somewhere, a door opens, spilling laughter and heat for a second before closing again. You stop at the chapel. The small window glows faintly. Inside, candles burn low, their flames steady despite the draft. The air smells of beeswax and stone. You sit on the last bench, listening to the quiet. The priest isn't here tonight. Perhaps even faith needs rest. You look at the worn floor, the wax pooling at the base of each candle, the faint glimmer of frost creeping along the sill. You think of how many winters this room has seen, how many storms, how many prayers whispered just to keep the cold at bay. When you step out again, night has settled fully. The snow falls thicker now, slow and deliberate. The lanterns flicker gold against the white. The world seems softer, half erased. The only sound is the steady hush of flakes against wood and the occasional creak of rope shifting under weight. The harbor, usually full of argument and laughter, now moves like someone sleeping lightly, dreaming perhaps of warmer seas. You walk to the end of the pier. The sea stretches before you, vast and dark, but gentler than it was. The tide breathes in long, slow intervals. You can feel it through the boards, that deep rhythm under everything. You close your eyes and breathe with it. The wind brushes your cheek. Snow lands on your lashes, melts there. The cold is sharp but clean, a language the body still remembers. Far out on the water, a faint bell sounds. A buoy marking the safe channel, its tone softened by distance. It rings again, slower, deeper, a sound like memory itself. You listen until it fades, then turn back toward the town. The streets are nearly empty now. Smoke curls from every roof. The snow thickens, smoothing the world into one unbroken page. You walk home slowly, not wanting to disturb it too much. The sound of your boots, crunch, pause, crunch, feels like punctuation on silence. Your door sticks in the cold, then yields. Inside, the air is still. You light your candle, and the flame makes a small golden circle in the gray room. You set your bread near the fire, warm your hands above it, and listen to the faint crackle of the wood. The light flickers across the walls, catching on the old grain of the beams. Everything seems closer, truer. You eat simply bread, a little cheese, the last of the mackerel. The salt tastes stronger tonight. You drink water that smells faintly of smoke from the kettle. When you finish, you sit by the window, the candle at your side. Outside, the snow falls thicker. The harbor below glows faintly under the moon. White roofs, dark masts, lines of shadow where the sea breathes. The tide moves slowly, deliberately, touching the stones as though counting them. You feel the rhythm in your chest again. that slow, patient heartbeat that belongs to both you and the sea now. You think about everything this town knows. The storm, the calm, the hunger, the feast, the work, the waiting. How every season teaches the same lesson in a different dialect. Endure, adapt, listen. The sea forgives nothing, and yet forgives everything eventually. You blow out the candle. The darkness folds around you, soft, full of small sounds. The sigh of wind at the window, the faint creak of the floor, the whisper of snow settling on the sill. You pull the blanket close and lie still. Your breath clouds once, twice, then evens. The tide outside moves in its endless sentence. In, out, in again. The sea dreams under the frost. The town sleeps. You drift with them, slow and sure, carried by that same rhythm. And when morning comes, gray and clean, the harbor will still be there. Quieter, older, but unchanged in the only ways that matter. The sea breathes, the ropes rest, the snow falls, and you sleep warm beneath the sound of water forgiving the world once more. You wake to light that doesn't ask permission. It slips through the cracks before you're ready, finding your face, your hands, your breath. It's softer than winter light, rounder, warmer, the color of milk warming in a pan. The air in your room has changed too. Still cool, but no longer heavy. There's a sweetness beneath the smoke, a whisper of green from somewhere inland. You sit up. The blanket falls away like an old season stepping aside. On the table, the last stub of your winter candle leans slightly, spent but dignified. You smile at it. The room smells faintly of salt and new bread, as though the world has already begun without you. When you open the door, the air greets you with kindness. It's damp, yes, but soft damp, forgiving damp, the kind that smells of soil and salt and something faintly alive. The street glistens with thaw. Puddles hold bits of reflected sky, trembling each time the wind passes. Smoke rises thinner now, less a defense, more a habit. You walk toward the harbor as you always do, though today the path feels lighter under your boots. The stones, freed from their film of frost, are almost friendly. The gulls are louder again, their cries ringing like laughter that forgot it was supposed to be polite. Somewhere a hammer starts, not the cold metallic strike of winter, but a brisk, hopeful rhythm. Work beginning, not surviving. At the quay, the water looks different. It's not blue, not gray, something between, pewter laced with pearl. You can smell the mud again, that faint sweetness the frost had locked away. The tide moves easily, no longer cautious. Ropes sag softer, their fibers damp but flexible. You run your fingers along one and feel the quiet relief of something thawed. The baker's boy runs past, cheeks pink, arms bare for the first time in months. "Warm today," he calls, though your breath still ghosts faintly in the air. He's grinning, flour on his forehead, his joy as unsteady as spring itself. You buy a loaf anyway, lighter bread now, white and soft. When you tear it open, steam lifts like prayer. The market is already half awake. The fishwives have shed their heavy shawls for lighter ones, their laughter sharper but brighter. One waves a knife as she talks. It flashes in the sunlight. "Good day for drying nets," she says to no one in particular. Another replies, "And a worse day for excuses." You smile as you pass, the rhythm of their voices like birdsong with opinions. A boat creaks as it's pushed off, the first of the season to test the new warmth. The water welcomes it with a low slap, almost tender. The men aboard move easily, their bodies remembering what it feels like to trust the sea. They whistle a tune older than any of them, something about wind and home and both meaning the same thing. You stop near the ropemaker's shed. The wheel turns again, slow but steady. The old man has returned, his hands raw, his eyes bright. "She's back," he says, nodding toward the sea. "Didn't I tell you? She always forgives." You nod. "And us?" He laughs softly. "We try harder every spring." The air smells busier now, salt and pine and yeast, the world mixing its ingredients for the new season. The shipyard hums with work. Sawdust floats like gold dust in the sunlight. The rhythm of hammers returns, steady and sure, a kind of heartbeat the harbor missed. You stop to watch. The new ship, once a skeleton of winter, now shines under a skin of fresh tar. A man brushes it smooth, the motion reverent. "She'll sail soon," he says. "Maybe she'll find warmer winds than we ever will." By midday, the warmth has grown confident. People loosen scarves, open windows. The church bell rings, the sound carrying farther in the clear air. Children chase each other along the quay, kicking pebbles into puddles that sparkle like broken mirrors. Dogs bark at the waves, as though arguing with time itself. You sit on a barrel and watch the world rearrange itself into life again. The gulls dive for scraps, fishermen shout greetings. Women hang laundry that snaps sharp and white in the breeze. Every sound overlaps. Laughter, hammer, bell, wave, and somehow nothing collides. It's all rhythm, all order, all chaos disguised as harmony. A woman passes carrying a basket of herbs, thyme, rosemary, wild garlic. The scent follows her, sharp and green. You close your eyes and it fills your lungs. A taste of earth after too long indoors. When you open them, the light has shifted slightly, warmer still, golden now. A group of men unload barrels from a wagon. Their movements easy, almost graceful. One hums a tune, another whistles the same melody a note behind. The harmony happens by accident but feels inevitable. Work here has always been another kind of music. You buy a small cup of ale from a tavern window, its foam bright against the clay rim. It tastes young, sweet, a little unfinished, like the season itself. You drink slowly, watching the sea shift color with each cloud that passes. Blue, gray, silver, then something like glass. The tide is high now, lapping at the stones with quiet confidence. You lean forward, hands on your knees, and watch it move. It seems to breathe more deeply today, the way a chest rises after a long cough. The surface breaks, briefly, with the flash of a fish, the first you've seen since winter locked the harbor. Feels like a promise, and you take it as one. The afternoon stretches long and lazy. The air softens, the light mellows. People move slower, not from weariness but pleasure. The tavern spills laughter into the street. The cooper has set a bench outside his shed. He sits on it, pipe in mouth, face tilted to the sun. You nod as you pass. He raises the pipe in greeting, smoke curling upward like contentment made visible. The sky begins its slow transformation, from blue to honey to rose. The water mirrors it, softer now, every ripple a reflection of warmth. You walk the edge of the quay, boots tapping quietly on stone, the sound almost musical. The air tastes faintly of salt and wood smoke, and underneath it all something green, the smell of life trying again. A gull glides past, silent for once. The bell rings in the distance, steady, unhurried. You realize it's the same note that opened your first morning here. The same sound, only softer now, not an announcement, but a reminder. You stand still for a while, listening. The tide reaches your boots and retreats, as if to say goodbye. You climb the hill slowly, turning once to look back. The harbor lies below, glowing like a thought you don't want to finish. Lanterns begin to flicker on. Smoke rises. The sound of laughter carries faintly. The sea stretches beyond it all, vast and gentle, folding color into itself. The horizon blurs where sky meets water. One last indistinction, as though even the world wants to rest. At the top, you stop. The wind brushes your face, warm now, carrying the sense of spring, damp soil, thawed wood, salt, and something floral you can't name. The air hums quietly. You feel it in your ribs, in your pulse, in the space between thoughts. You think of every season that has passed through you here. The bright mornings, the storm, the calm, the frost, the stillness. You remember the sound of hammers, the smell of bread, the laughter over ale, the creak of rope, the silence after rain. Each piece separate and whole, like boards joined by hand to make something that floats. You realize then that nothing ever leaves the harbor. Everything becomes part of it, the work, the waiting, the people, the tides. Even you. The sun lowers, finally. The world turns gold, then silver, then gray. A ship's bell rings once, far away. A punctuation mark at the end of the season. You smile, not sadly, just aware. You walk home in the quiet that follows, the kind of quiet that has nothing left to prove. The street smells of wood smoke and supper. Windows glow. The harbor breathes behind you, its voice soft, endless, content. Inside your room, the air is warm. The candle you've saved for spring waits on the table. You light it. The flame rises easily, steady. It throws your shadow against the wall, larger than life for a moment, then small again, human. You sit by the window. Outside, the tide has begun its nightly retreat. The lanterns shimmer on the water like stars that forgot their place. The world looks whole. You close your eyes. The warmth of the candle touches your skin. The air moves through the room like a sigh. And when you open your eyes again, it is full night. The flame burns low, the sea still whispering. You listen once, twice, until your heartbeat matches its rhythm. In, out, tide, breath. You, the harbor, the world at last, forgiven.